Norway has earned extraordinary wealth from North Sea oil. But it never became a country built around showing it off. Much of that wealth is saved rather than spent. It is one of the wealthiest societies on earth, but a small cabin in the mountains can still represent the good life. Then look at what Norwegians seem most proud of. At Preikestolen, a sheer rock platform hangs 604 meters above the blue waters of Fjords. In Lofoten, red fishermen's cabins sit beneath mountains rising almost directly from the Arctic Sea. Farther north, entire towns wait through the polar night for the northern lights to ignite the sky. Country became rich by extracting from nature, but built much of its identity around staying close to it. So why didn't oil wealth turn Norway into a showcase of luxury? Where did the money go? And what does one of the world's richest countries actually consider wealth? Come with Beyond Travel. We're crossing Norway to find out. If Norway doesn't display its wealth through excess, it certainly isn't shy about its landscape. Start at Preikestolen, or Pulpit Rock, above Fjords in southwestern Norway. After hiking through mountain terrain, the ground suddenly ends at a massive, almost perfectly flat rock platform. Its edge drops roughly 604 meters straight toward the fjord below. There are no skyscrapers here to give you a sense of scale. Instead, boats moving through Fjords look tiny from above, while dark blue water stretches between steep mountain walls into the distance. Walk toward the edge and there is no glass observation deck separating you from the view. Just rock, air, and more than half a kilometer of vertical space beneath you. And Preikestolen isn't even the most unusual sight above Fjords. Farther along the fjord is Kerag, rising more than 1,000 meters above the water. Hidden between two rock faces is Keragbolten, a huge boulder wedged inside a mountain crevice. Suspended high above the fjord, travelers actually step onto it for photographs, with open space visible beneath the rock. These places look almost engineered for dramatic photographs. But the real architect was ice. During repeated ice ages, enormous glaciers moved through Norway's mountains, carving deep valleys into the rock. When the ice eventually retreated, seawater flooded many of those valleys. The result was the landscape Norway is famous for today. Fjords, and some become even more dramatic when you experience them from the water. At Fjord, the passage narrows dramatically as mountains rise steeply from both sides. Boats travel through dark water beneath waterfalls, isolated farms, and slopes that leave remarkably little flat land between mountain and fjord. Then there is Geirangerfjord. Here, waterfalls descend from high cliffs directly toward the water. The famous Seven Sisters fall side by side down the mountainside, while old farms cling to slopes so steep that simply imagining daily life there can feel more intimidating than the boat journey below. Norway could have treated landscapes like these as obstacles to modern life. Instead, much of the experience is built around entering them. You hike above Fjord, cruise through Fjord, kayak beneath mountain walls, follow roads that disappear into tunnels and emerge beside waterfalls, and across the country, access to nature is supported by a tradition known as allemannsretten, the right to roam, allowing people broad access to uncultivated land as long as they behave responsibly. That begins to reveal something important about the question we started with. In Norway, one of the greatest luxuries isn't necessarily owning the mountain in front of you. It's having the freedom to experience it. And Norwegians don't reserve that relationship with nature for vacations. For many, disappearing into the mountains is simply part of normal life. Sometimes the destination isn't a five-star resort at all. It's a small wooden cabin, far from almost everything. For many Norwegians, the perfect escape isn't a luxury hotel. It's a hytte, a cabin somewhere in the mountains, beside a lake or deep in the countryside. Some cabins today are modern and comfortable, but the idea behind them is surprisingly simple. Leave the city, slow down, and spend time outdoors. Weekends can revolve around hiking, skiing, fishing, gathering around a fire, or simply sitting somewhere quiet with almost nothing happening. In one of the world's wealthiest countries, having access to emptiness can feel like a luxury of its own. This relationship with nature is often described by the Norwegian word friluftsliv, literally open-air life. It isn't necessarily about extreme adventure. A walk through the forest counts. So does cross-country skiing after work, spending a weekend at a cabin, or taking children into the mountains. And few places make that relationship look more spectacular than Lofoten. Far above the Arctic Circle, the Lofoten Islands rise abruptly from the Norwegian Sea around Rhine and Hamne. Sharp granite peaks tower almost directly above the water, while clusters of red wooden cabins sit along rocky shorelines. Those cabins are known as rorbuer. Today, sleeping in one can be a dream experience for travelers. You wake beside Arctic water, with mountains filling the window, and in winter, the northern lights may appear above the village. But rorbuer weren't created as luxury accommodation. They were working cabins for fishermen. For centuries, fishermen traveled to Lofoten for the great seasonal cod fishery. The catch was preserved as stockfish, hung on large wooden racks and dried naturally in the cold Arctic air. Even today, rows of cod hanging beneath enormous mountains remain one of Lofoten's most distinctive sights. Long before Norway found oil beneath the North Sea, fish was already connecting these remote islands to markets far beyond the Arctic, and the old fishing landscape never disappeared. Working boats still share harbors with visitors. Traditional rorbuer have been restored into accommodation. Fishing villages that developed around survival at sea have become some of Norway's most photographed destinations. Once again, something practical became something travelers now consider extraordinary. But Norway's outdoor culture goes beyond cabins and fishing villages. Through allemannsretten, the right to roam we encountered earlier, people can hike and spend time across large areas of uncultivated countryside, provided they respect the land, wildlife, and people living there. You don't need to own a mountain retreat to feel that the landscape belongs partly to your life. And after hours outside, another Norwegian idea begins to make sense. Of course, there is no perfect English translation. There is no perfect English translation. But think warmth, comfort, and time spent together. That might mean a fire, cat coffee, waffles with Norway's distinctive brown cheese, brunost, and nowhere you urgently need to be. It creates an unusual definition of the good life. Go outside into something enormous. Come back to something small. Perhaps that's why the cabin matters. It isn't impressive because of how much is inside it. The luxury is what waits outside the door. But mountains, cabins, and Arctic islands still don't answer the biggest question from the beginning. Norway became extraordinarily wealthy from oil. So where did all that money actually go? For that, we have to return to the city and follow the story beneath the North Sea. To find the money, start out in Oslo. Norway's capital is modern, expensive, and unmistakably prosperous, but it doesn't resemble the capital of a country trying to advertise an oil fortune. Along the waterfront, the Oslo Opera House rises from the harbor with a sloping roof. People can walk across, trams move through the city, electric cars are everywhere. Parks, public spaces, and the fjord remain woven into everyday life. Yet beneath this understated surface sits one of the largest national fortunes ever accumulated. Norway's transformation began after petroleum was discovered in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea in the late 1960s. The discovery of the Ekofisk field in 1969 confirmed that enormous commercial reserves existed offshore. Oil production followed, and the money began arriving. For a country with a relatively small population, the potential was extraordinary. Norway could have spent the windfall quickly, lowered taxes dramatically, or built monuments to its new wealth. Instead, it made a very different choice. The government established what is now known as the Government Pension Fund Global, commonly called Norway's Oil Fund. Petroleum revenues could be invested rather than simply consumed, allowing wealth from a finite natural resource to continue benefiting the country long after individual oil fields were exhausted. Today, that money isn't sitting in a giant vault beneath Oslo. It is invested across the world in thousands of companies, as well as bonds and real estate. Through the fund, Norway effectively owns small pieces of businesses across the global economy. That helps explain why so much of the country's wealth can feel almost invisible. The money wasn't meant to become a skyline. It became savings, and Norway placed limits on how much of that fund could normally be used in the national budget, designed to prevent one generation from consuming the fortune too quickly. The contradiction becomes even more striking when you return to the streets. Norway remains a major producer and exporter of oil and natural gas, but its domestic car market has moved overwhelmingly toward electric vehicles. Strong incentives help make EVs attractive, while petrol and diesel cars face comparatively heavier taxes and costs. So Norway can sell fossil fuels abroad while driving increasingly electric cars at home. It sounds contradictory because it is, but it also reveals how the country has approached petroleum. Oil is an economic resource, not necessarily a blueprint for how Norwegian society should look. The wealth appears elsewhere, in roads and tunnels that connect communities separated by mountains and fjords, in public services, in education and healthcare, in financial reserves designed to protect future generations from economic shocks. None of those things produces the visual spectacle of a supercar outside a marble palace. But perhaps that is precisely the point. Norway took something temporary, oil that can only be extracted once, and tried to turn part of it into something that could last much longer. That gives us one answer to our original question. Where did the money go? Much of it didn't go anywhere visible at all. It went into the future. But money alone doesn't explain why conspicuous wealth never became the country's defining ideal. Saving billions is a government decision. Choosing not to show off is also a cultural one. And to understand that side of Norway, we need to look at a very Norwegian idea. Sometimes acting as though you're more important than everyone else is exactly what you're not supposed to do. Saving oil money explains what Norway did with its fortune, but it doesn't fully explain why wealth here often feels so understated. Part of the answer can be found in a cultural idea known as Janteloven, the law of Jante. It isn't an actual law. It comes from a 1933 novel by Danish-Norwegian writer Axel Sandemos, but the expression became widely associated with a Scandinavian suspicion of bragging, excessive self-importance, and behaving as though your success makes you better than everyone else. That doesn't mean wealthy Norwegians don't own expensive homes, boats, or cars. They do, but openly advertising status can carry a different social meaning here. Success may be respected, while constantly reminding everyone of it is not necessarily admired. And there is another tradition that pushes in almost the opposite direction of individual status. Dugnad. Imagine residents of an apartment building spending a Saturday cleaning shared outdoor areas together. Parents might volunteer at a local sports club. Neighbors may help maintain a communal space. Nobody hired a luxury service to do everything for them. People simply show up and contribute. Dugnad has deep roots in Norwegian community life, and although modern versions vary enormously, the basic idea remains easy to understand. Some things work because everyone does their part. You can see another side of Norwegian identity on May 17th, Constitution Day. The streets suddenly look nothing like Norway's normally understated image. Norwegian flags appear everywhere. Many people wear bunad, elaborate traditional clothing whose designs can be associated with particular regions and family traditions. Town centers fill with parades, music, families, and celebrations. But one of the most distinctive features is what Norway's National Day places at the center: children. Instead of building the celebration primarily around military displays, children's parades became one of its defining traditions. In Oslo, thousands pass through the city while the royal family greets the crowds from the palace balcony. For one day, quiet Norway becomes extremely colorful, and then there is kos. The word is difficult to translate perfectly, but the feeling is simple: warmth, comfort, and enjoying time together. It can be coffee with friends, a meal at home, candles during a dark winter evening, waffles after skiing, or sitting beside a fire in the cabin while the weather outside gives you no reason to leave. None of this means Norwegians have rejected money or ambition. Country has entrepreneurs, expensive neighborhoods, luxury goods, and all the contradictions of a wealthy modern society. But it helps explain why Norway's idea of success can feel different from the image we normally associate with sudden resource wealth. Having more doesn't automatically require being seen having more. And perhaps that is why Norway can feel so orderly and restrained from the outside. But don't mistake restraint for cultural uniformity, because this quiet Scandinavian country also preserved medieval wooden churches that look almost mythical, celebrates an indigenous Arctic culture built around a completely different relationship with the North, and became the birthplace of one of the darkest and most rebellious music scenes in the world. Norway is about to get much stranger. Norway's quiet image becomes much more interesting once you look beneath it. Go to Bergen, where rows of narrow wooden buildings line the old harbor at Bryggen. Their colorful facades are beautiful today, but this waterfront was once part of a major trading network. For centuries, dried fish from northern Norway passed through Bergen on its way to markets across Europe, then travel inland, and Norway's wooden architecture becomes far stranger. At Borgund, a medieval stave church rises from the landscape with dark timber walls, steep roofs stacked above one another, and carved dragon heads projecting from the roof lines. Built around the late 12th century, Borgund is one of Norway's best preserved stave churches. It is unmistakably Christian, but visually, parts of it seem to carry echoes of the Viking world that came before. And Norway's cultural contrasts become even sharper farther north. Across northern Norway lives the Sámi, the indigenous people whose traditional homeland, Sámi, stretches across parts of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Reindeer are central to the livelihoods and identity of some Sámi communities, particularly in the north, although only a minority of Sámi are reindeer herders today. Traditional gakti clothing can identify regional and family connections through distinctive colors and patterns, while joik, one of Europe's oldest surviving vocal traditions, remains an important form of Sámi cultural expression. For travelers, northern Norway can offer opportunities to learn about Sámi culture through local guides, food, reindeer experiences, handicraft, and storytelling. But Sámi culture isn't something preserved only for visitors. It belongs to a modern indigenous society living alongside contemporary Norway. And then there is another Norwegian cultural export that seems almost impossible to place beside all this order, community spirit, and cozy cabin life: black metal. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, Norway became one of the centers of a new extreme metal scene. The music was deliberately raw, dark, confrontational, and obsessed with themes that stood almost completely against Norway's comfortable international image. For a country associated with social trust, prosperity, peaceful cities, and course, producing one of modern music's most notorious underground movements is a remarkable contradiction. Yet perhaps it fits Norway better than it first appears. The same landscapes that inspire hiking holidays can become something entirely different under winter darkness. Mountains turn black against the snow. Forests disappear into fog. Medieval churches rise from landscapes where daylight can feel scarce. Norway can be warm and communal indoors, but outside, nature has never promised to be gentle. And the farther north we travel, the more obvious that becomes. Beyond the Arctic Circle, summer can bring sunlight through the middle of the night. Winter does the opposite. In Tromsø, there comes a period when the sun no longer rises above the horizon at all. Yet more than 300 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, there is a modern city waiting beneath that darkness. And above it, on the right winter night, the entire sky can turn green. In Tromsø, winter doesn't simply mean shorter days. For several weeks around the middle of winter, the sun stays below the horizon. The city enters the polar night. But Tromsø doesn't shut down. More than 300 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, people still go to work. Students attend university, cafes stay open, and city lights glow against the snow. Around 80,000 people live in the municipality, making Troms one of the largest urban centers this far north. Then look up. Tromsø sits beneath the auroral oval, making the surrounding region one of the world's best-known destinations for seeing the northern lights on clear, dark nights. Green bands can appear above snowy mountains and fjords, sometimes stretching and twisting across much of the sky. And a few months later, the same city experiences the opposite extreme. From roughly late May into July, the sun doesn't set. You can hike at midnight beneath a bright sky, take a boat through the fjords late in the evening, or simply lose track of what time it is because darkness never arrives. Winter takes the sun away. Summer refuses to give you a night. But even Tromsø isn't the end of Norway. Fly roughly 1,000 kilometers farther north, deep into the Arctic Ocean, and you reach Svalbard. Here, mountains rise from glaciers and frozen valleys. There are no roads connecting the archipelago's settlements. Outside Longyearbyen, snowmobiles and boats become essential ways of moving through the landscape depending on the season. And humans are no longer automatically at the top of the food chain. Polar bears live across Svalbard. Leaving settlements requires taking Arctic conditions and wildlife seriously, and travelers venturing into the wilderness typically do so with experienced guides. Yet in this remote landscape, Norway has placed something designed not for today's travelers, but for people who may live generations from now. Built into a mountain outside Longyearbyen is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Inside are backup samples of seeds from gene banks around the world, stored as insurance against the loss of crop diversity through war, natural disasters, equipment failures, or other crises. And there is something almost perfect about ending our journey here. Norway became extraordinarily wealthy by extracting a finite resource from beneath the earth. It could have treated that wealth as something one generation had won. Instead, much of its oil fortune was invested for the future. And high in the Arctic, another form of wealth is being stored inside a mountain for the future as well. Money in one vault of sorts, seeds in another, both built around the same basic idea. Just because something valuable belongs to you today doesn't mean you have to use all of it today. That may finally bring us back to the question we started with. Norway's wealth was never simply about how much money the country could make. It was about what it could afford not to consume. Perhaps Norway's story isn't really about choosing simplicity over wealth. It's about what happens when a country becomes extraordinarily wealthy but doesn't allow money to become the only measure of a good life. Across Norway, the modern and the ancient, prosperity and wilderness, comfort and simplicity continue to exist surprisingly close together. Maybe that's why this country feels different. You arrive expecting to be impressed by how rich Norway is, but you may leave thinking about something else entirely. What does it actually mean for a country or a person to be wealthy? Perhaps Norway doesn't give us one simple answer. It simply gives us a different way to ask the question. Thanks for traveling with Beyond Travel. Until the next journey.